our next master homeopath is Roger Morrison, Dr. Roger Morrison, who's from California, although he started his life in a place called Tennessee, which you may or may not know where that is. I don't quite know where it is, but it's in America. And he went to university there, studied medicine, and was working in the ER. And then he somehow, which I'm hoping we hear the story, got somehow the bug and went to Greece. And not only went to Greece, but studied the Greek language so he could learn and communicate and work with homeopathy. You all know him in terms of, if you don't know him, you know him from his books and the amazing contributions that he has brought to homeopathy and continues to bring to homeopathy. His desktop companion, his desktop guide, his desktop companion, and of course, his amazing, amazing carbon book. And I hear a little bird is telling me that there might be another book bubbling, percolating around. So perhaps he'll discuss it with us. So I'm so, so happy that you agreed to be with us today, Roger. So happy to see you. Welcome.
Likewise.
Welcome.
Likewise.
And Roger, show us your wall. Can you show us at all your wall?
Let's see.
Look who's with us today.
Oh, many great homeopaths.
Who's with us today? Just introduce the lineup for us.
From right to left, we have Dr. Benning. We have Benninghausen and Hahnemann.
Wow.
And Farrington. We have let's see, Gladwin and John Weir.
Wow.
And just people looking over my shoulder.
So
keeping
great.
Me honest. Yeah.
Anna also said she has Hahnemann looking over her shoulder.
On the other side, we have all of my rocks, which keep me solid.
Nice.
It's so nice to see you, Lori.
It's so great to see you, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
And happy Celebration Day.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the day we all think of each other.
It's true, isn't it?
It's the day we remember how unified we are and what we're unified by. Because we have, homeopaths as a group are very opinionated. That's my finding.
How did you come to that, Roger? I'm surprised.
It's pure observation. And, we fight and wrangle a lot. I mean, I'm surprised how much we fight, but I think it's just a sign of how passionate we are about what we're doing, with the unfortunate intervention of egos, which always tend to gum up the works, right? So, and I've done my share of this wrangling, and I've sworn off of it, but anyway, I probably will engage in it again tomorrow. So, I was thinking back because my introduction to homeopathy came in 1977, so it's a long time.
How did the bell go? How did you catch the whisper?
Well, I've told this story before, but
Please,
it's one of my favorite stories. So
good.
I was in medical school. I was a junior in medical school. And I was very interested in meditation, Zen Buddhism. That was the time for these things. And so a friend of mine handed me The Laughing Man magazine, which was a publication of Bubba Free John.
Yes.
And in it was interviews that Bubba Free John, who later became Da Free John or Da John or all sorts of different names anyway, and who was in fact a patient of George Vifulkas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and a dear friend and mentor to our brother-in-arms, Bill Gray.
Yes.
So in it was interviews with 3 Zen Roshis.
Okay.
And I read those 3 interviews, so it was very interesting. And then right beyond that was a 2-page article by some guy named Bill Gray about homeopathy and his time in Greece studying with George Vifulkas. So I was in, a very orthodox medical school. It was, as conservative as it comes. And so here I read this article by Bill Gray about the wonders of homeopathy, which I had never heard of, and, using these tiny dosages of things, one single dose. And I read it and I burst out laughing. I said, what a ridiculous thing to put in a journal like this. And I was so disgusted, I threw the journal into the garbage can. And I thought no more about it until I woke up at 3 a.m., straight out of my sleep. I bolted up. And the words that were in my mind, I don't know why, were, what if that was true? And I went out and in the middle of the night, I pulled the journal out of the garbage can and I brought it in, and there was a contact address for George Vifulkas, but nothing for Bill Gray. So I wrote to George Vifulkas that night. In the middle of the night, I wrote to George Vifulkas, and I said, is there some way I could come and study homeopathy, or come to whatever? And I waited and waited. And about 3 months later, after I'd completely forgotten about the whole thing, I get a letter in the mail from Bill Gray from Greece. And it starts out, thank you for writing to George Vifulkas. Since you mentioned my name and since I'm American, George asked me to write you back and invite you to come to a seminar in May of 1978. I think this was the end of 77. And so I was surprised to have even gotten an answer back, but, that's how it worked in those days. And so I thought, well, maybe I can go. Now, at that time, I was, I was now, like established in the medical school, and I had started a club, just a student club, to study alternative things like running as a good form of exercise, and, that maybe diet has something to do with health. So kind of very progressive ideas for University of Tennessee. So and the head of our club, who was a dermatologist, and he was a runner. And so I got him to be a sponsor of our club. And he had been elevated to the acting dean of the school like a week before I received this invitation from Bill Gray. So I walked into the student affairs office and I said, I would like to take off 2 weeks in May of 1978 to go and study homeopathy in Greece. And the woman at the desk said, student Dr. Morrison, we do not give off time to students to go flying over to Europe to study things. And I'm sure that, right, Morrison, where have I heard that name, Morrison? Are you the student that Dean Rosenberg was talking to me about the club? And I'm sure the dean would like you to go to Greece to study homeopathy. And that's how I got permission to go.
Wow.
And so I made plans. I got something that probably most of your younger participants here have never heard of. I got a Super Saver flight to Greece. A Super Saver flight means they call you up at the last minute and say, get on the plane tonight, you're going. And it could be anywhere from like 10 days window, and you have to go on the day that they tell you. So I ended up in Greece about a week before the seminar. And at that time, I didn't speak Greek. I didn't know anybody in Greece. I was there alone. I had traveled when I was a child, or, like 7, but I'd never been overseas since then.
Wow.
And, and I was young in medical. I think I was like 21 or 22 at the time. So actually I was, so maybe 23 or 24. Anyway, I was completely nervous. I didn't know what to do. I had all this time on my hands. So I figured I'm going to go to this clinic and see if I can meet one of the doctors there. I had never seen a homeopath. I'd never seen a homeopath. I had never actually spoken to a homeopath. And here I was. I took my last dollars and flew to Greece for this thing. And so there I was. And so I walked about 5 miles to get to the clinic from where my hotel was. So it wasn't exactly a hotel. It was a roof on the top of a hotel in a sleeping bag. It only cost me $1.50 a night. So that's why I was there. So I walked into this clinic. I found my way in, and the clinic was, I kid you not, it was smaller than this office. So it was, and it was crowded with at least 25 people. We're sitting huddled together, and against the wall, and even in the middle of the room there was, and then through a sort of an open doorway into a hall, you would see somebody in a white coat whisk past every now and then. And I tried to interrupt one of them, and he didn't speak any English. He goes, sit down, sit down. He thought I was a patient. I needed to be a patient. And so I was sitting there, and the woman next to me nudged me with her elbow and said something in Greek. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't speak Greek. And she's had very good English. And she said to me, oh, did you come all the way from America to be treated in the center? And I said, no, I'm an American doctor, and I came here to learn about homeopathy. And somebody next to her tugs on her sleeve and says something in Greek with like a question. And I hear something, blah, 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 blah. And then Americanico doctor, or, like, this is an American doctor. And then people in the room started paying attention, because in Greece, it's a very religious country, and, you have the Father and the Son, and then the saints, and then under that are the American doctors, and then under that. So it was like big excitement, an American doctor sitting in the room with you. So the woman starts describing, she says, I'm a patient here, and I got a lot of help here. I said, really? Tell me about it. And she said, I had migraine headaches for 20 years. I had been lying in bed with migraine headaches every day. And nothing that I did could get me well. And I came here, and since the day after I came here, I have not had a single headache. And it's been 3 months now. And my life has changed. I have my life back again. Whoa, that's pretty good, Yeah. And so then the woman next to her starts talking to her in Greek again. And basically what she's saying is, tell the doctor about me, tell the doctor about me. And she had had severe rheumatoid arthritis, and she had been, laid up with that for some years. And then, she came to the clinic and she had been cured. And then suddenly the entire room, all 25 of these patients were standing in a semicircle around me. Tell about my case. Tell about my case. And I stayed there the whole afternoon. And I didn't speak to one doctor came out and said in English, the seminar is in one more week. Go away. But so I stayed there for that afternoon hearing story after story of cure after cure after cure of conditions that I knew perfectly well were incurable.
Wow.
And then I went away. And I came back in a week, and I walked into the room, and I was met at the doorway by Dr. Rini Baha, who was an unbelievably masterful homeopath and as kind a person as walked on the face of the planet. Wow. And she introduced me to some of the other seminar members, a lot of whom were Americans. I remember Dean Carruthers was there, Bill Gray was there, I think Carl Robinson was there, and many, many other. Mayor Jackie Wilson was there, so a lot of American doctors were there. It was only open up to medical doctors at the time, dentists, medical doctors like that. It was a big factor at the time. And these were people that I became friends with forever. David Workington was there.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And then George Vathulkas came in, and he started talking about health in a way that I had never even conceived of health existing. He talked about that health was, a holistic phenomena, that it had to do with spirituality, it had to do with creativity, it had to do with freedom from pain and restriction in all areas of your life. Anyway, that was not the way I had learned about health. And so it was just a revelation. And then he started talking about cases and remedies, and that was the beginning of my learning.
Wow.
And so I went home, and I began reading Kent's Materia Medica, lectures on Materia Medica, cover to cover. And for the next easily 5 years, I read every single day at least one remedy from Kent. And I read Kent from cover to cover, and then started back at the beginning. And for 5 years, I read Kent cover to cover for probably, 20 times, or easily 20 times. And then
Roger,
I went back.
What was that inspired you to do that? What was happening?
Why I got there was a mystery to me. But once I saw George Vathulkas and I saw the cases and these people crowded around me, I knew that I didn't want to be just a doctor. I wanted to be a healer. I wanted to see people get truly well. That was what had drawn me to medicine. That wasn't what I was finding in my schooling and my education. People were sustained or maintained or ignored or discounted or mistreated, or occasionally a bit of warmth glimmered through the cracks. And people were treated with sometimes with kindness by certain physicians, but it was basically a mechanical business, and I didn't find my place in it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was really searching for a place. Anyway. So.
But this dedication of reading Kent from cover to cover again and again, I mean, this is remarkable.
Yeah, so many of the people on this panel are inspired and dedicated and talented in so many ways. I mean,
yes.
Anybody that doesn't know that Rajan Sankaran is one of the great geniuses of homeopathy has not caught on to, and I am probably one of the most fortunate homeopaths alive because I had the chance to sit for 2 years in George Vithulkas's office, day in and day out.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, and I also had the chance to study with Rajan Sankaran. So who gets it better than that?
Yeah.
Nobody. Well, anyway, there was a lot of twists and turns how I got to go to Greece because at first George said, yeah, come to Greece for 6 months if you want to study further. And I said, I think it would take probably more than 6 months. And he said, well, I can't necessarily, how would you survive and what would you live on? Anyway, there were a lot. So he said it would be impossible for you to get a license to practice in Greece. And I said, really? Why? He said, well, the ministry would never allow you to do it. So I wrote to the ministry, and I had my congressman write to the ministry with me and ask if I could be allowed to come in and study in Greece for 2 years. Wow. And so the woman who received the letter from me and my congressman was a patient at the homeopathic center.
Of course.
Of course. So she took the letter along with the application, and she went to her boss, the Minister of Health, and she said, here, sign this. And he signed it, and I got to go to Greece. It was one thing or another like that got me to Greece, and then I went and I studied there. And my days when I was in Greece would start out at about 6 o'clock. I'd wake up and, I'd look out my window and usually it was dark, and I would look out my window, and I was living in George's tool shed that we converted into a bedroom for me. It had a bathroom in it, kind of a shower situation set up. And I would look out my window, and if his light was on, I would, put on a sweater, and I'd walk out through the garden and up his back stairs to his office. Wow. And he would be there with a pile of cases like this thick. The clinic then, which had 30 doctors, over 100,000 patients, and received about anywhere from 30 to 50 new cases per day. Oh. And all of those cases would come to George's box, except for the very most senior homeopaths like Vasilis Gegas or obviously Irini Bacha, or just one or two of the Mitza Garzonis, and just a very few people were allowed to prescribe on their own.
Right.
Stefanos Peterakis, just like a handful. All the rest of the doctors, every new case would go to George for him to study. And if you were bold, you would put down your prescription at the end of your written case, like what you would prescribe.
Right.
And then George would just, put an X through it and write down the proper remedy, and then So I would go up, and my job was I would repertorize the cases for him. He'd say, repertorize this symptom, this symptom, this symptom. You just point them out really quick. So I'd repertorize, I'd write it out for him. When I was done, then he would, we would look at it together, and he would say, what do you think? And I would choose a remedy, and he would say what the real remedy was. And that's how I learned, was every morning we did that.
Fantastic.
Then when we finished those 30 cases, I would drive the cases to the clinic, which was about 15 miles away. I would turn them in, then I would see my patients all day. And then about 5 o'clock, George would drive in, and he would see his patients, and I would be allowed to sit in his office every day. He let me sit in there and see patients with him, and just amazing. And then, of course, in the middle of the night, phone calls would come in so-and-so is in the hospital in this town. And off we would go in his old Mercedes, and I'd drive along with him, and you know, he would get to the hospital. He said, "This is an American doctor." You know, he would point at me. And so then that was sort of our ticket to come in, and then he would examine the patient, and then, you know, we would give the remedies, and off we would go, you know, and that was my life for 2 years. It was the best education any human could have gotten. And I, you know, it was so exciting just to sit there and see case after case after case get better. And, you know, I looked at my cases by the time I left Greece, and definitely 90% of my cases were cured.
Wow.
In fact, and when I sat with George Vithulkas for 2 years, okay, just 2 years we sat, only one case did not get well.
Wow.
And unfortunately, it was the wife of the ambassador from India. She didn't get well. Everybody else got well. So there was that dichotomy between Greece and India, even back that far. So, and then after my time in Greece, then I moved to California, where my wonderful wife, Nancy Herrick, had set up, along with, you know, many other homeopaths, had set up the Hahnemann Clinic.
Yes.
And I waltzed right into this wonderful clinic, and then we practiced for, you know, let's see, that was 85. Then I think it was in 94. Then Nancy, who like the bravest homeopath I ever met, just took off and went to India for a month and sat in with Rajan, and came home and told me all these things about plants and animals and minerals, and there's a difference, and just like when I got that initial article in the Laughing Man Journal, more or less I threw the whole thing in the garbage can. And I said, "Don't even talk to me about this ever again," to Nancy. I said, "You do whatever you want in your practice, but don't ever talk to me about Rajan Sankaran again." And essentially the same thing happened. After a week, I came to sort of sit bolt upright and thought, what if that was true?
Wow.
You know?
Yes.
And so I thought I'd tell you about the case that made me understand that it was true.
Wonderful.
Just a little bit. I'm not going to go into all the details.
Yes, please.
All right.
What a story, Roger. I've never heard your story.
Really?
So thank you so much.
I edited it because there was a lot of other things that happened.
Thank you. I love it. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So this was a woman that came in with horrible migraine headaches. And these headaches were not just, you know, episodic headaches. She was having migraine headaches. First, they started out lasting, you know, 4 and 5 days at a time. And after a number of years, she was having headaches 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day for her whole life. And you can imagine how hard it was for her to live. But it hadn't begun with just headaches. So it started out with a sort of atypical epilepsy, seizure disorder, which were characterized as temporal lobe seizures because of their very unusual characteristics. And so she had these seizures for about a period of a year or a little more than a year. And the doctors were not certain that she needed anticonvulsant medication at the beginning, because while there was a seizure disorder picked up on the EEG, they were relatively rare, and they didn't they weren't considered all that threatening.
Yes.
But after a year, they decided that she would benefit from being put on anticonvulsant medication. I think it was phenobarbital that they put her on, and the seizures went away. And she took that medication for about a year or maybe 2 years. And then they decided, well, let's see how you do if you go off the medication. So that, she and the allopath together, they decided to go off the medication. And she tapered off the medication, and within a very short period of time, within a week or so, she developed these headaches. And the headaches continued for a long period of time. And finally, the neurologist said, let's put you back on the phenobarbital and see if the headaches go away. So they put her on the phenobarbital, but the headaches did not go away. And there she was with these headaches and the phenobarbital. Eventually, she went off of it, tried all different, migraine medications, and the migraines did not get better. The headaches persisted, and finally, in desperation, like most of our patients, she decided it was worth spending a little money and see if this odd man in Berkeley could fix her headaches. So she came in to see me. And she was a very unusual person. Let's see. So when I took her case, I asked her, so tell me about the seizures, because I figured probably I'll get some good clues about the proper remedy from the seizure, the pattern of the seizures, as well as from the headache, because the headaches were not very easily described since they were 24/7,
right?
Meaning they were all day long. There wasn't anything that made them better or worse. They were just constant. So I asked her about her seizures, and this is what she told me. She said, the seizures always came at night when I was asleep, and I would be sort of awakened into consciousness with a horrible, unbearable feeling inside. It was a feeling of terror and horror and sometimes rage mixed in, and it was an excruciating sensation. It would go on for a period of time, and then I would blank out, and in the morning I would wake up and, my husband would say, you had another one of those episodes last night. He could tell.
Yeah.
And but there was no actual shaking. There was no movement disorder. She never bit her tongue. She never lost her urine. She never, there weren't a lot of other things other than the fact that it came on at night. But it was not very frequent. At most, it was once every 1 to 2 months she would have one of these episodes. But by the third or the fourth seizure, she realized that every time she had a seizure, that day, some sort of international event would take place. Not just some sort, but always a plane crash.
Wow.
In which dozens of people were killed. And I said, well, tell me more about it. And she recounted this plane crash, these famous plane crashes, and there was a period where there were quite a few of these within a 1 or 2 year period. After my first seizure, this plane crash with some Boeing whatever, went down and 120 people were killed. That happened the next day. The next time I had the seizure, it was this plane crash, and she would know them all by name. She would know how many people. She would know where they were, and she started paying attention. And every time, except for one time, every time that she had one of these seizures, a plane would crash. And the one time it was not a plane crash, it was because of the Challenger explosion.
Yes.
The shuttle plane, the Challenger.
Yes. Every
Every single time. And at first, other than the emotional consequences, she wouldn't have considered taking medication. But finally, the horror of knowing every time that she would go through this, she was basically reliving the horror of all these people on the airplane as they realized that they were all about to die, and that was the feeling that she was going through.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And finally, it got to be so much that she just couldn't tolerate it. And she said, just stop this. I can't bear it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
she stopped it. Right. And then the rest of the story is pretty much the same. So at the end of this story, what I had was 2 symptoms. Headaches, which were long continued. And so that was a reasonably sized, there's probably only 20 remedies in that rubric. So I said, one of these remedies must be a very good seizure remedy, I hope. And indeed, one of the remedies was the remedy indigo. Okay. So, and interestingly, this woman, also from another context, she would find herself not exactly in a plane, but she would be with this whole group of people all contained together inside this room where something terrifying was happening. So she never actually saw an airplane, but that was the experience. And, at the time, of course, this was long before, the work on the plant families, but indigo is in the Fabaceae or the Leguminosae. Yes. And the whole thing is things crowded together, right?
Yes.
So there, of course, that was not at all in my consciousness at the time. But so I had just heard about Dr. Sankaran, and from Nancy, my wife, Nancy Herrick, who braved Mumbai, and I could tell stories about that, how nervous I was letting her go to Mumbai. I think, I kept writing to Rajan saying, are you sure my wife is going to be safe if she comes to Mumbai? And he would write back, and he told me later, he said, I believed at the time if anything happened to your wife, you would probably come to India and strangle me. So anyway, here was, basically the thesis as I understood it from Rajan was that the nature of the substance of the remedy, the nature of the remedy impressed itself upon the human consciousness in some way that it could be read. Like snakes, people who needed a remedy from snakes had a strong reaction to snakes. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, here's this remedy that's got a very strong characteristic, indigo. Everybody knows what indigo is. It's this incredible color, one of the most, evocative colors in all of the palette of colors.
Yes.
So if this concept is true, then this patient must have some reaction to the color indigo.
Oh,
that was my reason.
Okay.
So I was going to disprove everything that Rajan Sankaran ever said by showing that this case didn't have any relationship to the color blue. Okay. So I said to her, do you like colors? She said, I love color. I said, do you have a favorite color? She goes, oh, I have so many favorite colors. I love reds and oranges, and I like this color and that color. I said, okay, see, I knew it. And so, then I said, well, do you like the color blue? She says, yes, I love the color blue. And she said, I like bright blues and any kind of blue, and but then immediately she comes back in and reds are extremely, evocative. I went, okay. But I decided I'll go one step further. I said, what about the color indigo? And she goes, indigo? She says, indigo is the deepest color. My very soul melts into indigo. And then she reaches into a bag and she says, see, here's my journal that I write every day. And on the cover of her journal, her personal, like her diary, it says Indigo Dreams. And then she said, and here's the address of my house. She lives out in the country, and her house is called Indigo Acres.
Oh, my gosh.
I said, Oh, darn. My heart dropped in my chest. And I said, okay, we're going to give you this remedy made from indigo. And she said, wonderful. And she took the remedy Indigo 200C. And she called me and she said, she called me the next day and she said, were my headaches supposed to get worse on the first day? Because I heard that sometimes in homeopathy they get worse. Right. And I said, they could get worse, but they don't have to get worse. She said, they got worse. And I said, okay, well, just wait and, see me in a month. She came in a month. The headache she had the day after the first remedy was bad, worse than her average, or worse than her continuing level. And then on the second day, her headache stopped.
Wow.
And now that was 20 years ago. She's never had another headache. And that was the case in which I decided, damn, I've got to study with this guy Sanskrit. And so I went later that year to my first seminar with Rajan. You were there. Of course you were there. Yes. And then, that took me on many, many worlds and many travels. And I would say that probably for the first 5 years after I met Rajan, my results plummeted.
Yes.
Because I was trying to reproduce what Rajan was doing. And he was so much further ahead in his understanding of, it was before there was sensation, long before there was sensation or sensation method. But in just his understanding and blending, he did it unconsciously. And of course, he made it hard for us by saying that he said, I never open the repertory. Of course, if you have the repertory completely committed to memory, you don't have to open up the memory, the repertory. But anyway, so it took me a long time to accommodate to these new tools that were being used. But then eventually, and then of course, when ailments from fears, phobias, destructive behaviors and so forth. What are the destructive? So I go through and I list all the mentals, then the generals, then the physicals this way. And then once I've done that, then I'm satisfied that I've gotten far enough to make an initial writing. So I separate the constitutional cases from what I call anecdotes or case reports. So besides the 40-some constitutional cases, here's some just case reports, like from the literature or whatever, where people write. They won't write a full case, but they'll write about a case from their, like I told the indigo case, not a full case. I didn't put in any modalities. I didn't put in any food cravings. I just gave a sort of a quickie report about what I thought was the essence of that particular case.
Yes.
So then I have another, like 24 cases that were just anecdotes or case reports. And then I go through all the historical cured cases as well. So, and then I go for a remedy like belladonna. And so these are all modern acute cases.
Yes.
Like just for acute conditions. And then these are all the historical cases. And I do the same thing, with the green and the red and the yellow. So then so that's basically the process. And then after I've written it, then I go back to, I usually choose like 5 to 10 cases that I thought were like the best taken, the deepest taken cases. And then I'll go back through and I'll reread those cases, over and over and sort of compare it with what I got from the first draft. And then I'll write the final version of belladonna. So for a big remedy like belladonna, that's about a month process.
Wow. Working
a couple days a week, just writing. So that'll be a long process. So that's what this book is. So it's going to be called clinically verified materia medica. I've got about 12 years invested in the book so far. What I've decided to do is to publish it in 3 different parts. The reason I'm doing that is because the biggest problem for me is that I've used, say, 40 cases of constitutional belladonna. That doesn't mean I couldn't use 41.
Right.
So then I write belladonna, then another belladonna case comes in. And I want to go back and add in everything. So my editor had threatened to murder me if I kept doing this. So, whereas I had written the first what we had decided section, she said, you have to publish this or you'll keep tinkering with it forever.
Yes.
And I won't be here if you keep doing that.
Thank you to your editor from all of us.
So I think the first third of this, I like third because of Clark, even though I'm nobody likes Clark's politics or the soul that could allow him to be a pro-Nazi and, all that kind of stuff. But as a homeopath, I really have always respected him quite a bit. So I'm dividing in a third, kind of close to the way he did it.
Lovely.
And I expect the first third to be out around the end of this year, beginning of next year. I've already written the first 2/3 of the book, but I'm going back and revising the second third. And so that's about where we stand on that book. I hope that wasn't too long.
Oh, we're all so grateful to you.
Well,
Roger, when one time we were on a walk and we were talking about this project of yours, and you talked about it as underneath was a desire to give back to the community, to the energy that had given you so much, like a giving forward. Can you say something about that? The energy, the motivation, the inspiration to do what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you only have to remember, like a person like Kent, who gave his eyesight for all of us, literally gave his eyesight for us, or Hahnemann, who starved for years as he, formulated the ideas for homeopathy. Thank you, Samuel. And so many great homeopaths who have given everything for homeopathy. And of course, my personal favorite, Farrington, who on his deathbed, when they were telling him he should try allopathic medicine, he said, "I'd rather die a Christian." So homeopaths have taken this business pretty seriously through the centuries. And you only want to give back to them, which is giving forward to the other people in the future what will be the best of you. And homeopathy is so filled with statements like, all my belladonna cases, blah, 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 right? In which there may only be 1 or 2 of their belladonna cases that are blah, 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 or maybe just 1. And so we fill each other with our ideas and our kind of, for whatever reason, we fill each other with ideas that are slightly off the mark. So my goal in this is to, as I write it, I'm giving you like 16 of the belladonna cases had fear of dogs. So you know exactly what percentage, what number, how strong that symptom was, and how very frequently the symptoms that we all know for a fact are true are not true.
Wow.
And so, I remember in Greece, I one time had a case in which I had decided to prescribe causticum, and my colleagues were horrified because the patient craved sweets. They said,
Right.
you can't possibly give causticum if the patient craves sweets.
Right.
And I went, oh, okay. I didn't know it was that strong. And so now when I went back and I did the analysis of causticum, you know what the strongest craving for causticum is? Sweets. More causticum patients crave sweets than any other food that they crave. And so there are just myriads of symptoms in which we got the wrong impression from previous homeopaths. So my goal, if anything, was simply to give the plain, unvarnished truth in as exact and precise numbers and details as I could give in this book. And I thought that was the best I could give because, there's a lot of geniuses in homeopathy in modern times, Jeremy and Jan Schulten and Anna and Rajan. And I mean, there's so many geniuses. And that was never my curse, was, to be cursed with genius. But the one thing I was cursed with in great measure was determination. And so, if I undertake a task, probably it will get finished in the long run. So I figured this was a good way to spend my energy within my own talent range and make a contribution to the science that I think will, and it's been so helpful for me because just one other brief example. So as I was doing this for the remedy creosotum.
Yes.
Now, how many cases of creosotum will anybody have? 2, 3 cases, but by using everybody else, basically stealing everybody else's cases to read through, I was able to find 17 cases of creosotum. And as I was reading through them and doing my whole system, what I found was that 6 or 7 of them had fear of airplanes.
Wow.
And this is something that couldn't possibly be known by anybody unless you're putting all of the creosotum cases together.
Right.
Because no one person's cases will have that fear.
Yes.
And even if it did, they wouldn't notice it because their 2 cases would be separated by years or months.
Yes.
At the very
Yes.
least. So when I saw that, then, that went into the write-up just out of the host of symptoms that went into every write-up. And so then one day I'm seeing a patient who has a tremendous fear of airplanes. And I go back and I look. She didn't have any vaginal symptoms whatsoever, but she had some other symptoms that had come out in this combination. I gave creosotum and it worked. So I realized that this book is just...
is working on you and shaping you.
Well, I've been able to go back many, many cases and confirm exactly what other patients had said. Little details of things that you just don't expect. The main craving for Orem is ice cream.
Wow.
Why would Orem want ice cream that much? And so it's just, just so many details that I was able to find. And then I can just do searches like fear of airplanes. I didn't actually remember this about creosotum, fear of airplanes, but I did a search for airplanes in my own book, and I came to creosotum, and then I found the remedy. So it was like the book was teaching me rather than I was. Anyway, so this book and I have been companions for a long time.
Oh, Roger.
And I'm getting ready to introduce him to all of my friends and all the people out there and all the future people. And, this book won't, even though I will finish this book, somebody will take this book up again in another generation and make it much better than what I've done. And that's what one homeopath always does. Always try to leave, you always try to leave the world a little bit better than where it was when you started. And that's what we have to do. And that's what we've done. And homeopathy is in a tight place right now. It's in a very threatened position, more than I remember any time during my practice. And but this will pass just like it always has in other times. By 1985, when I came back to California, there were 1 or 2 90-year-old homeopaths in San Francisco and who had been practicing for a long time. And after months of effort, we were able to arrange a meeting with them.
Right.
And they invited us to a dinner. They had a dinner once a month. They invited us to the dinner. They were very nice. And after the dinner, they said, well, it's nice to meet you. I hope we see you again sometime. We said, wait a minute, aren't we going to talk about cases? Aren't we going to talk about homeopathy? And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. And it turned out that they had agreements with all their hospitals where they worked, that they would not teach homeopathy to any other students, and they would therefore be allowed to keep their licenses and practice homeopathy without interference.
Wow. Wow.
And so homeopathy all but died out in the United States during that time. And it was, largely due to people like Maisie Panos and, of course, Bill Gray and my own dear Nancy Herrick and others who revitalized homeopathy back and brought it in. But we should never think that that's going to last forever. It'll be like a wave. This wave is dying out, but a new wave will come. And what we want is to have the tools and the infrastructure and the consciousness ready for that next wave when they come, which can't be long, right? I hope it's not long. I hope we're here to see it, right?
Me too.
Yeah. And I believe we will. And I hope that we won't make the same mistakes. I know we won't make the same mistakes as the people before us.
Roger, we're so, so, so grateful on behalf of everybody, all the homeopaths now, all the homeopaths from the past, and all the homeopaths in the future. So much gratitude for your perseverance and your beautiful offering to homeopathy and contribution.
Thank
so
you,
much,
Lori.
Roger.
I got to say, it takes one to know one.
Oh, thank you. Thank
All
you.
right.
Our
Thank you
love
so
to
much.
Nancy, and thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.